I'm Sami Zaidan in Doha with a look at the headlines here in Al Jazeera now. US President Donald Trump says he hasn't listened to recordings of the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi as they're too graphic. The US government is expected to release a report into the killing on Tuesday. Yemen's Houthi rebels say they're halting drone and missile attacks against Saudi Arabia, the UAE and their Yemeni allies. The Houthis released a statement saying they're ready for a broader ceasefire if the coalition wants peace. On Thursday, the Saudi Emirati coalition briefly paused airstrikes on the besieged city of Hodeidah. They resumed on Sunday. Egypt has arrested at least 40 human rights lawyers and activists, according to Human Rights Watch. It says the arrests are part of a mass detention campaign targeting people who offer humanitarian and legal support to families of political detainees. A car bomb has killed at least 5 people in the Iraqi city of Tikrit. 16 others were hurt. The explosion took place outside a restaurant. Security forces have closed most of the city's roads. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has held crunch talks to save his government after one of his coalition partners withdrew last week. It's left him with just 1 seat of a majority in parliament. He says he doesn't want to call an election. The trial of 9 pro-democracy demonstrators has begun in Hong Kong. They've pleaded not guilty to criminal charges for their involvement in the Occupy Central protest in 2014. The demonstration paralyzed Hong Kong's financial district for more than 2 months. If convicted, some of the city's best-known activists face several years in prison. Hundreds of people in the Mexican border city of Tijuana have been protesting against the arrival of asylum seekers from Central America who are trying to cross into the US. They want the government to prevent the migrants from staying in the city. Rescuers in Northern California are ramping up efforts to identify victims of the wildfires as rain is forecast for the region. 77 people are confirmed dead and about 1,000 remain unaccounted for. Those are your headlines. The news continues after World War I through Arab eyes. Stay with us here on Al Jazeera.
Malik Tariqi, the Tunisian writer and broadcaster, is telling the story of the First World War from an Arab perspective. In 1915 and 16, the war in Europe was bloody, merciless, and unrelenting. The British and French were bogged down in the trenches against a stubborn German enemy. But it was a different kind of war in the Middle East. Britain's strategy was to capitalize on growing Arab nationalist feeling against 4 centuries of Ottoman rule.
شعر العرب أنه لا بد من التفكير بحمايتهم. اجتمع أعضاء الجمعيات السرية العربية في دمشق وهم من العراقيين ومن السوريين أي من بلاد الشام. اجتمعوا وقرروا أن يثور العرب وطلبوا من الشريف حسين أن يرأس هذه الثورة.
In 1915, the British High Commissioner in Cairo, Sir Henry McMahon, began negotiating an alliance with Hussein bin Ali, the Sharif of Mecca.
An exchange of letters took place between McMahon and Hussein about the possibility of joining some sort of revolt against the Ottomans. The result of that was that the British promised Sharif Hussein and his sons gold and guns and an Arab state or states to be founded after the war was over, and in return for that they would declare war on the Ottomans themselves.
Sharif Hussein was also the choice of Arab secret resistance groups.
بعثوا الورقة التي تحتوي مطالبهم ووضعها فيصل ابن الحسين بحذائه واتجه فيها إلى مكة والتقى بوالده وإخوته في الطائف وبحثوا هذا الموضوع وقرروا أن يبدأوا الثورة وأن ينقذوا البلاد العربية.
But it was far from simple. All of this maneuvering was going on at the same time as the British and French representatives, Mark Sykes and François-Georges Picot, were carving up the Middle East between them. Sharif Hussein dreamt of a great Arab state to include the Levant from the Egyptian border up to the Taurus Mountains in Turkey, plus all of Mesopotamia to the border in the north, and the whole of the Arabian Peninsula, except for the British colony of Aden.
كانت بريطانيا حريصة أن تخدم مصالحها بشتى الأساليب. يجب أن نعرف أنه لم يكن يدور في خلد أي شخص في ذاك الزمان أن تكون هناك مشروع للتقسيم، لكن بريطانيا وجدت أنها سوف تقوم بحماية مصالحها. كيف ستؤول لها هذه المنطقة بعد نهاية الدولة العثمانية؟ كانت تفكر بطريقة أنه لا صداقة تدوم إلى الأبد، ولكن هناك مصلحة تدوم إلى الأبد.
Britain weighed up the benefits and agreed to Sharif Hussein's demands. For his part, Hussein called for an Arab uprising against the Ottomans on the 5th of June 1916. The Hashemite forces, under the command of Hussein's son Faisal, mobilized. From their base at Aqaba, they attacked the Ottoman supply line, the Hijaz Railway. They found the Arab tribesmen of Transjordan a tough nut to crack. The line here today at Al-Qatrana is near the Jordanian town of Ma'an, a tribal stronghold that the Hashemites were never able to capture. Before the war, the Hijaz Railway had been a way for Arabs here to travel from Al-Qatrana to new destinations. 100 years on, the trains don't stop here anymore. When Faisal's Hashemites moved north in 1918 and formed a pincer movement with General Allenby's British divisions in Palestine, they were able to take Damascus on the 2nd of October.
The big battles were occurring in Europe. This was the right flank of an army that was invading north from Egypt up the coast of the Mediterranean, eventually to end up in Aleppo.
After taking Greater Syria, Faisal felt he'd achieved his objective and fully expected the British to deliver on their promises. Ottoman rule of the Levant was at an end, and in a month, the war would be over. The armistice was signed on the 11th of November, 1918. The Arabs who'd fought for the victorious Allies thought it was payback time. They expected sovereignty and independence.
That was how it was understood in the Arab world. The real problem for the region is that although the British government unleashed this idea, took the genie out of the bottle of the idea of national freedom, the British understanding, and certainly the French understanding, of what national freedom would mean for the region was very, very different from how it was conceived across the region itself.
First to react was Egypt. Its people had paid a high price for supporting the British. Of the 1.2 million men deployed in different roles in World War I battlefields, 500,000 perished. A few months after the war ended, the Egyptian politician and statesman Saad Zaghloul asked the British High Commissioner if he could lead a delegation to the Paris Peace Conference. He wanted to negotiate Egyptian independence.
Zaghloul and his supporters tried to put pressure on the king to change the relationship with the British. The king has a respect within, I would say, ordinary Egyptians. But at that stage, that respect has disappeared. Why? Because of the loss of Egyptians in the war, with the economic ramification on the people's life, all of this actually created a wider gap between the king and the Egyptian people, which facilitated the effort of Saad Zaghloul to widen the gap more and more with the king and with the British, because they wanted to make sure that British has no place in Egypt after what happened in the First World War.
The British arrested Zaghloul and his companions in March 1919 and exiled them to Malta. Egypt exploded into revolution. Faced with mass civil disobedience, the British released Zaghloul and allowed him to travel to Paris. But when he arrived, he was devastated to learn that the British protectorate over Egypt had already been recognized.
The allies sit down in Paris afterwards, and it should be pretty easy to hammer out some sort of peace settlement, but it's virtually impossible. There's just too many contradictory agreements, which is why they had to start again from scratch.
And one of the agreements was with the Hashemites. Prince Faisal also traveled to Versailles in the hope of achieving his family's goal of a greater Arab state. But a united Arabia was the last thing the Allies wanted. And the Arabs would now learn a new term, mandate.
هذه الفكرة هي فكرة استعمارية، ولكن ذات ثوب جميل جدا. هذا الثوب يقول أن الدول الغربية الكبرى مثل بريطانيا وفرنسا لها مهمة حضارية. هذه المهمة هي النهوض بهذه الشعوب وتعليمها على حكم نفسها بنفسها حسب الطراز الغربي حتى تصبح قادرة على ذلك، وأنه هي تحتاج إلى مدة معينة من الزمن لابد من إخضاعها لهذه الدول. يعني أنظمة الانتداب هذه كان الغاية منها الحقيقية هي الهيمنة على مقدرات هذه البلاد العربية وإخضاعها للهيمنة الغربية وفرضها عليها أطول مدة ممكنة.
Faisal's disappointment in Versailles didn't stop him from seizing his opportunity. In Damascus in March 1920, he declared the Syrian Arab Kingdom as an independent state, with himself as king.
وكان عنده أنصار لبنانيين كتار حتى لبنان أيضا ما يكون مفصول عن سوريا.
وزراء كثير.
وأول وزارة اللي كونها نصفها من المسيحيين نصفها من المسلمين، هذه كانت شغلة روعة. طبعا الفرنسيين ضربوها بحملة عسكرية، راحوا من بيروت للشام بمعركة ميسلون.
Faisal's declaration of an independent state was the deal he had with the British. But the French, with Sykes-Picot heavily in mind, had very different ideas. On the 24th of July 1920, a small force of Arab volunteers gathered at Maysalun to try to stop the French army reaching Damascus. But the French troops routed the Arab nationalists and swept on to the Syrian capital. King Faisal fled to London. The first independent Arab state, the Kingdom of Syria, lasted less than 4 months. The French occupation of Syria turned into a mandate in 1922 and lasted until 1936, with all the problems it entailed and which are still felt today.
الانتداب الفرنسي بيجي بيقسم سوريا إلى دويلات طائفية، دولة علوية، دولة درزية، دولتين سنية دمشق وحلب، وبعدين وضع سنجق الإسكندرونة اللي في مدينة أنطاكيا. مدينة أنطاكيا هي مركز المسيحية العربية، وبعدين الفرنساويين عطوها للأتراك ونحن سكتنا، جذورنا كنا مسلمين ومسيحيين بأنطاكيا.
The French mandate also had a big impact on Lebanon.
تأسيس نظام طائفي بلبنان بالأول كان بشكل ليبرالي إذا بدك، بس بعدين صار بشكل شرس حتى أيام الانتداب الفرنسي بلبنان، وقت ما صار في كتلة مسيحية كبيرة كان بدها تصوت لرئاسة الجمهورية للشيخ جليل الشيخ محمد الجسر مفتي طرابلس. اجى المندوب السامي وقف الانتخاب، انه هي دولة مسيحية، انتبهوا. فهالجو الطائفي والمذهبي من ذلك الحين تواجد.
The religious and ethnic divisions created by the French Mandate in the 1920s and 30s have had a lasting effect on both Syria and Lebanon, leading to a string of internal and cross-border conflicts in both countries. The problems experienced in the past 3 decades in Iraq also date back to the British Mandate. In March 1917, British forces captured Baghdad, ending Ottoman rule in Mesopotamia. 3 years later, in April 1920, the League of Nations assigned Iraq to Britain as a formal mandate.
They had interest of Iraq because they have also strong presence in the Gulf as well and in south of Iran. So basically they have a good knowledge about what's happening in Iraq. And they built strong relations with the tribes in Iraq. In the light of what's happening basically and the failure of deliver to the Arabs and establish what's so-called an Arab state, and the Hashemite basically they have good linkage with Arab nationalists in Iraq. All of this together helped to mobilize people and they have 1920 revolution.
In May 1920, the Iraqis, a mix of Kurds, Sunni Arabs and Shia, began peaceful protests in Baghdad. The British arrested the leaders and sparked violent confrontation. They then crushed the Iraqi uprising with overwhelming force. 2,200 British and Indian soldiers were killed, but around 8,500 Iraqis were killed or wounded. By now, many Arabs were starting to look back on Ottoman rule as preferable to being under the British and French mandates.
Arab people believed that they could seek greater ties with the Turkish people because most Arab people saw the Turks as fellow Muslims who were fighting a similar issue, European occupation.
But the defeated Ottomans were also facing a changed world. 5 countries occupied parts of present-day Turkey. The Treaty of Sèvres near Paris in August 1920 laid out the Allies' harsh post-war terms. The Turks turned to the hero of Gallipoli, the army officer who'd led the Ottoman defeat of the Allies in the Dardanelles in 1915.
The conditions the Treaty of Sèvres placed on the Ottoman Empire were extreme. So extreme that Kemal Atatürk and the Turkish nation would refuse them and repel 5 invading European armies.
Mustafa Kemal managed to command the Turks to victory in what became the Turkish War of Independence.
لا شك أن هذا جعل مصطفى كمال معجزة أمام الأتراك. بعبقرية مصطفى كمال استطاع أن يوحد تركيا وأن يجعلها دولة واحدة، وأجبر الدول الغربية على الاعتراف باستقلال تركيا وبوحدتها الجغرافية والسياسية عام 1923. بعدها ألغى السلطنة ثم ألغى الخلافة بعدها بعام سنة 1924، ومنذ إذن بدأ بحملته الإصلاحية، أي بتخليص تركيا من طابعها الإسلامي الذي أثار حفيظة العرب والمسلمين في جميع أنحاء العالم.
With the bond between Arab and Turk now broken, Mustafa Kemal and the independent Turkish state turned their backs not only on their own past, but on the Arab peoples as a whole. The Arabs were now on their own.
When it becomes clear that the occupation of these regions is going to take place, that the British and French armies are not going to leave, that the British and French empires, states, are going to impose a colonial regime, armed opposition, armed revolt becomes an obvious and almost foregone conclusion.
Fawzi al-Khawaji was one of the Arab generation that lived through the horrors of World War I. He started as an officer in the Ottoman army, but after the war, he joined King Faisal when he ruled Syria, and Fawzi also fought at Maysalun in 1920. When the Syrian revolution against the French erupted 5 years later, he didn't hesitate to join the nationalist side. Malik talked to al-Khawaji's close friend, Yahya al-Hakim, in this house in Beirut, where he and Fawzi used to meet.
سنة 25 عندما أعلن سلطان باشا الأطرش في السويدة الثورة على الفرنسيين، فوراً أعلن انضمامه وأعلن من حمى يعني انضمام الفريق اللي كان معه. ونحن ما لازم ننسى إنه قبل بسنتين يعني سنة 23 هو أعطي الليجيون دونور لأنه كان من الشباب العرب يلي انضم إلى الجيش الفرنسي، ولكن هو كان عنده فكرة تانية إنه هو إذا أنا عم بنضم هو لأنكم أنتم رح تساعدونا إنه نطور البلاد ونحسن أوضاعها ويصير الانتداب، لأنه نحن شعوب غير ناضجة بعد لاستلام مقاليد الحكم، وأنه تقدر تقوم بحقيقة بناء أوطان. فكانت النتيجة لا أنه هم عم يهدموا الأوطان.
After 2 years of heavy fighting, 6,000 rebels were killed and 100,000 Syrians displaced. The revolt was ultimately put down by French forces. But Fawzi al-Khawaji continued his struggle. In 1948, he led the Arab Liberation Army of Volunteers in Al-Nakba, meaning the catastrophe, the Arabic term referring to the founding of Israel.
كان بعدين أنا سألته سؤال فوزي باشا إنه كيف كنت ينضموا لك الثوار؟ قال لي أنت بدك تستغرب يحيى إنه أنا كل الشباب يلي إجوا لينضموا بالثورة كان سنة 25 أو سنة 36 أو سنة 48 يجوا بسلاحهم، يعني كل واحد حامل البندقية تاعته ويسألوا فوزي باشا أنت يا ابني إن شاء الله منك متزوج؟ لا الحمد لله الله أكرمني وأنا متزوج. إن شاء الله ما عندك أولاد؟ لا والله الحمد لله أنا متزوج وعندي أولاد. طيب أنت على مين يعني تترك العيبة؟ تعرف شو قال لي؟ قال لي أنا بعتمد إنه بعد الثورة الحكومات الوطنية هي اللي حتاخد على عاتقها تربية أولادي. فالناس هون كان عندهم صدق الوطنية يلي اليوم مع كل الأسف يعني بيحزن إنه نشوف إلى ماذا آلت الحال في الدول العربية.